Hi, my name is Aver. Tonight, my aunt touched the rusty handlebar of my bicycle and laughed like it was a punchline. My cousin raised his glass and said I should park it far from the house so it would not embarrass the family photos. I stood there with oil on my fingertips and the smell of rain on my jacket, feeling smaller than the dented bell that still clung to the frame. They were already posing in shimmering outfits, and I was the girl with the squeaky chain. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the way the laughter rippled into silence whenever I got close. The way I slid off me like water on chrome. It was the side comments. Maybe one day she can afford a real ride. Maybe if she married up. My brother chuckled about the basket tied with fraying twine. My mother shook her head as if she could disown a bicycle and the daughter who rode it in the same moment. I gripped the old seat and pretended to adjust it, just to keep my hands busy. The leather was cracked in tiny maps, like roads to nowhere. I kept telling myself to breathe, to count the seconds between the flash of camera shutters and the sting in my chest. In the glass of the patio door, I saw a version of me that their words were trying to pin down. A girl who belonged outside, hands dirty, shoes wet, smile polite. The version they could live with. Have you ever stood in a room where your own blood made you feel like a stranger, all because of what you owned? Or rather what you could not own? Would you forgive that, or would you fight? I remembered every mile that bike had carried me. Morning shifts in the gray light. Late returns under street lamps that hummed like tired bees. The chain had snapped twice, and both times I fixed it on a sidewalk with nothing but stubbornness and a flathead screwdriver. That bicycle was not pretty, but it was honest. It told the truth of my days in chipped paint and grit. Still, honesty does not soften humiliation. My uncle clinked a fork against a glass and announced a toast to achievement and success, words that glowed on their tongues like neon. I wondered if anyone would ever speak those words to me without a smirk. I wondered if tonight was the night I would finally say something back. I did not know that the night had already chosen me. I did not know that a different engine was humming for me somewhere just beyond the hedge, quiet as a secret, steady as a heartbeat. I did not know that the road out of this driveway would change how they said my name. And what happened next shocked everyone. Would you keep standing there and swallow it, or would you find your voice and ride forward? The evening had the kind of polish that only money could buy. Crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across polished marble floors. The air carried the scent of roasted duck glazed with honey, mingled with the sweetness of chocolate fountains that bubbled like tiny rivers of temptation. Every corner of the dining hall was curated, velvet drapes falling like waves of wine, tall centerpieces bursting with lilies and roses, the clink of silver cutlery ringing like a rhythm that only the wealthy could dance to. I stood at the edge of it all, my palms still faintly stained with grease from the bicycle I had parked far outside the gate. The house was too proud for something as humble as two rusted wheels and a crooked frame. Through the tall windows, I could still see the faint shadow of my old bike resting under a street lamp, its paint chipped away by years of rain, its handlebar wrapped with fading tape. It looked like an uninvited guest left out in the cold. Inside, my cousins sparkled in satin dresses and custom-tailored suits. The men wore cufflinks that gleamed under the light, while the women floated in gowns that shimmered like waves of the ocean. My uncle's gold watch caught the chandelier's reflection every time he raised his glass. Even the laughter in the room had a shine to it, polished and rehearsed, echoing against the tall ceilings as if money itself had found a voice. The dining table stretched endlessly, heavy with roasted meats, crystal bowls of olives, bread arranged like works of art, and bottles of wine older than I was. My plate looked empty in comparison, though it was filled just like theirs. It wasn't the food that separated me from them. It was the weight of invisible judgment pressing against my shoulders. Every sparkle on their wrists reminded me of the dull chain on my bicycle. Every car key they placed casually on the counter reminded me of how tightly I held onto my own handlebars. I tried to sink into the background, folding myself into the shadows of the room. But it was impossible to disappear when every detail screamed my difference. Their perfume smelled of roses and musk. I carried the faint trace of rainwater and road dust. Their shoes clicked sharply on the marble. Mine were damp from the ride. Their laughter was effortless. Mine was borrowed and careful. Even the walls seemed to whisper that I did not belong. Family portraits lined the hallway, each one showcasing expensive smiles and luxury vacations and grand events. I was in none of them. I had always been the one behind the camera, the one holding the coats, the one forgotten when the shutter clicked. As I sat at the far end of the table, I felt the distance stretch longer than a marble floor. I was family by blood, but in this room, blood meant little. Status spoke louder. Money echoed stronger. I was simply the girl with the old bicycle parked outside in the dark, while they paraded their cars under the warm glow of valet lights. And yet, I stayed. Because sometimes silence is the only shield we have. And sometimes, silence waits for the moment it can roar. The first jab came lightly, disguised as a joke. My cousin Marcus leaned back in his chair, swilling the wine in his glass if he were hosting the evening himself. "Aver," he said, loud enough for the entire table to hear, "I passed your bicycle on the way in. I almost thought it was part of the gardener's tools. Didn't know you still rode the old thing." Laughter spilled across the table like broken glass. Maya covered her mouth as though she wanted to soften the cruelty, but her eyes glimmered with the same amusement. My mother shifted in her seat, not to defend me, but to distance herself from me, as though the shame of a daughter on two wheels might stain her silk dress. I forced a smile that trembled at the corners. "It gets me where I need to go," I said, quietly, almost swallowed by the clatter of forks against porcelain. "Where you need to go," my brother Daniel leaned in, his voice thick with mockery. "Like the bus stop, or maybe the discount store. You should really consider upgrading, Aver. A woman your age, still pedaling through rain like a schoolgirl. It's embarrassing." He turned toward the others, raising his eyebrows as if inviting applause. They gave it freely. My cousin Lydia adjusted her diamond necklace, her eyes sharp. "Honestly, I don't understand how you can stand it. I would rather stay home than ride somewhere on a bicycle. It says everything about a person." Her words sliced deeper than she realized. They didn't just laugh at my bicycle, they laughed at me. At my choices, my worth, my existence in their carefully curated world. I gripped my napkin until my knuckles whitened. The fabric tore a little under my nails, but I didn't let go. My voice locked in my throat, each insult layering itself like stones pressed on my chest. "Maybe one day," Marcus continued, savoring the spotlight, "she'll save enough to buy something decent. Or maybe she's waiting for charity. We could all pitch in tonight. You know, a family gift." By Aver a proper ride, the room erupted again, forks tapping on glasses, lips curling in cruel delight. I felt my face heat, my ears burning with shame. My eyes darted toward the window, where the faint shadow of my bike sat, lonely and small. It was as though even the night conspired to remind me of where I stood. I wanted to speak, to tell them that my bicycle had carried me through storms they never braved, that it had taken me to late-night shifts and back home safely when no one cared if I had a ride. But my throat refused. My heart pounded against the cage of my ribs, torn between silence and rebellion. "You should be grateful you're even here," Daniel said, leaning back with a smirk. "Not everyone gets a seat at this table. Remember that before you embarrass us further." His words dropped like a gavel. The table fell into a cruel hush, and in that silence, I felt smaller than ever. Their laughter at my bicycle was not born that night. It was only the newest cut in a long collection of wounds that had never healed. I remember birthdays where my gifts were hidden behind the cake, not out of surprise, but out of shame. because my wrapping was simple brown paper while theirs glittered in ribbons and silver foil. I remember family photos where I was asked to stand at the edge, crop easily if needed. Sometimes the cropping wasn't even metaphorical. Years later, I saw the framed pictures on my NS wall. My image literally trimmed away, as if I had never been there. I think of the summer I worked jobs to help Daniel launch his startup. I typed his proposals after midnight, delivered packages on my bicycle through the city heat, and even lent him the savings I had scraped together. He promised to pay me back when the business succeeded. It did. He bought himself a brand new car, posted photos of it with the caption "Hard work pays off." My name was nowhere. My contribution erased like chalk in the rain. There was the Christmas when Lydia left as I handed her a handmade scarf. She draped it across her shoulders with mock elegance and said, "So quaint. Did you knit this while waiting for the bus?" The others chuckled, sipping their wine, leaving me with hands that smelled faintly of will and humiliation. Worse still was the silence of those who should have defended me. My mother's silence was a blade sharper than any insult. She nodded politely at the cruel jokes, sometimes even smiled, as though protecting her own standing mattered more than protecting her daughter. My father used to be my shield, but since he passed away, the family's cruelty had no counterweight. His absence left me naked to their scorn. The bicycle became more than transport. It was a symbol of survival. Each time the chain snapped, I fixed it myself. Each time the rain soaked me to the bone, I kept pedaling. Each insult at the family table, each dismissal in their voices, echoed with the rhythm of my tires against wet pavement. They saw rust. I saw resilience. But resilience is invisible to those who only measure worth in luxury. I remember the sting of being erased from my uncle's wedding seating chart. I was seated at the farthest table, near the kitchen door, because she won't mind, she's used to being alone. The laughter that followed was louder than the music hut. And tonight, as Marcus mocked my bicycle and Daniel reminded me to be grateful, every buried memory rose up like ghosts pressing against my chest. Each injustice stacked upon the next until I could barely breathe under the weight of them. I told myself to swallow it again, to let it pass, to not make a scene. But somewhere deep inside, something had begun to stir. A quiet rebellion. A voice that had grown tired of silence. What I didn't know was that the night would give me a chance to finally let that voice roar. The night was slipping into that dangerous rhythm where cruelty feels normal, where laughter becomes a weapon sharpened by repetition. I sat with my fork untouched, my napkin torn, my pulse racing like the pedals of my old bike. And then quietly, almost imperceptibly, the rhythm broke. It began with a vibration in my pocket. My phone lit up with a notification. A message from my manager. "Don't you forget, tomorrow morning we announce the employee of the year in front of the board. Congratulations again, Aver. The car is waiting at the dealership, ready for you." For a moment, the words didn't feel real. I read them twice, then a third time, as if the letters themselves might vanish. The car. My car. Not a hand-me-down, not a charity gift, not a rusted chain fixed with stubborn fingers. A reward for my work, my persistence, my worth. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, heat blooming in my chest. No one at the table noticed. They were too busy comparing vacations in Greece, diamond bracelets, and the taste of imported wine. But inside me, something shifted. The shame began to peel away, replaced by a steady, glowing resolve. I thought of every late night I stayed behind at the office, finishing reports no one else wanted to touch. Every presentation I delivered with shaking hands but steady eyes. Every moment I swallowed tears, turning them into determination. This recognition, this reward, it was mine. Not given by family name or bloodline, but earned on my own terms. The voices round me blurred into background noise. The chandelier above seemed less like a cage of gold and more like a stage light, illuminating the truth that the night was not theirs to control. I sipped my water and let a smile tug at my lips. For once, the smile was not forced. It was a secret, tucked between me and tomorrow. They still mocked me, still whispered about the girl with the bicycle. But what they didn't know was that the bicycle was no longer the whole story. Outside, waiting just beyond this night, was a different engine, one that would carry me past their laughter and into something undeniable. I didn't speak yet, not here. Not while the table was still armed with cruelty. But deep down, I knew the moment was coming. The moment I would rise, not with words, but with the undeniable sound of a new engine roaring to life. I looked toward the window, where the faint silhouette of my bicycle waited in the dark. For the first time, I didn't see rest. I saw a farewell. The evening swelled with noise, glasses clinking, laughter echoing off marble walls, every cruel word growing bolder under the weight of an audience. I felt like prey surrounded by predators, every glance a sharpened fang. Daniel raised his voice above the chatter, tapping his fork against his glass. A toast, he declared, smirking as his eyes slid toward me. To success. To moving forward. To leaving bicycles in the past where they belong. The room erupted in applause. My name was never spoken, but the laughter bent toward me like a spotlight. My aunt leaned in with mock sweetness. Don't take it personally, Aver. They only tease because they love you. Her bracelets jingled as she patted my hand, cold and condescending. I swallowed the fire in my throat, but my silence only fueled their cruelty. Lydia tilted her wine glass, eyes glittering. Maybe next year she'll join us in something better. Who knows, maybe a scooter. The table burst into laughter again, sharp and merciless. I pushed back my chair slowly. The screech of its legs against marble sliced through their laughter. Every head turned. My chest rose and fell, but my voice refused to break. Thank you, I said softly, almost trembling. For reminding me who I am in this family. Daniel smirked, convinced he had won. Finally admitting it, are you? But I didn't answer. I folded my napkin carefully, set it beside the untouched plate, and stood tall. The room buzzed with whispers, some curious, some still laughing. I walked toward the door, each step louder than the last, echoing against marble like a drumbeat. Behind me, their voices rose. Running away already. Can't take a joke. Don't slam the door on your way out. I didn't. I opened it slowly, the cold night air spilling in like freedom. Outside, the shadow of my bicycle waited under the street lamp. I paused only for a moment, enough for them to assume I was leaving the way I came on 2 wheels, into the night, humiliated again. But they didn't know. Beyond the hedge, parked under the soft glow of valet lights, was something else. Something new. Its polished surface caught the light, its engine waiting silently like a promise. I gripped my coat tighter, the chill no match for the fire building inside me. They thought this was my exit. But it was only the beginning of the moment they would never forget. The cold night air wrapped around me as I stepped off the marble porch. Behind me, the laughter continued, muffled by the heavy doors, still convinced I was mounting my old bicycle. My hands trembled, but not with shame this time, with anticipation. I walked past the street lamp, past the shadow of the rusted bike leaning against the curb. For a moment, I placed my hand on its worn handlebars, the leather cracked like an old scar. Thank you, I whispered, a farewell only I could hear. Then I turned toward the valet lights. There it was. Sleek, gleaming, the midnight blue car that bore my name on the papers waiting in my bag. A gift from my company. A reward for nights spent working while my family mocked me for pedaling through rain. Its surface mirrored the stars above, its engine purred alive with the push of a button. The valet, recognizing me from the paperwork, handed over the keys with a polite nod. I slid into the leather seat, the scent of new beginnings wrapping around me. My hands gripped the steering wheel, steady, strong. Behind me, the doors opened, Curiosity had pulled them outside. Marcus stopped mid-laugh. Lydia's wine glass froze in her hand. Daniel blinked, as though the sight of me behind the wheel shattered something he thought permanent. The engine roared to life, deep and undeniable, silencing every whisper. I pressed the accelerator, guiding the car slowly past the family gathered on the steps. Their eyes followed, wide, their smirks gone, the laughter dead on their lips. I rolled down the window just enough to meet their stares. My voice was calm, even carrying further than any shout. This was earned, not given. Remember that. No one spoke. No one laughed. The only sound was the hum of the engine as I pulled away, the glow of the headlights carving a new road for me. For the first time, silence belonged to me, and it was louder than any applause. The city lights blurred into streaks as I drove through the night, the hum of the engine beneath me like a song I had been waiting my whole life to hear. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside, the weight of years was lifting, piece by piece, like chains falling into dust. I did not need to look back at the house to know what lingered there. Their stunned silence would echo longer than any laughter they had ever thrown at me. In that silence, they would remember the sight of me not pedaling into the dark, but gliding past them in something they could never reduce to a joke. My phone buzzed with unread messages, missed calls from my mother, short texts from cousins suddenly soft in tone. We didn't mean it. Come back inside. We were only joking. I let them pile up without reply for once. I owed them nothing. When I parked the car outside my small apartment, the street lamps cast the bicycle's shadow against the wall. I left it there, leaning quietly, a reminder of the roads I had already conquered. That bicycle was not a shame. It was a chapter. But tonight, I had turned the page. I climbed the stairs with my keys in hand, pausing only once to glance back at the car. The metal glistened under the lights, not as a trophy, but as a simple proof that worth is not measured in gold watches or mocking words, but in persistence, in the grit to keep moving forward when no one believes in you. They had buried me in humiliation again and again, but they never realized that humiliation can be fuel, and tonight, I had burned it all into fire. I closed my door behind me, silence filling the room. But this silence was not lonely. It was powerful. It was mine. They mocked my old bicycle, I whispered into the stillness. But they will never laugh the same way again.